with us through every conceivable human emotion. Help us, Lord, to experience your presence, even when we feel surrounded by darkness, even when we're ready to give up. Lord, help us to find our strength and power in you. Speak into us a message this morning that transforms our hearts and prepares them for your presence, for your joy, for your hope. Help us to be attentive to you, to be in your presence, and to find your grace. Gracious and loving God, we ask for these things in spite of me or through me. Amen. So last week we began this series on Job, and we heard about how everything in Job's life was going wonderful, how he was the epitome of the best that you could be. He was upright and righteous, so much so that our story says that God was bragging about him in heaven to the devil, and the devil decided to challenge God on this. And so we heard about how this Job, how everything was going wonderful, how his kids were all wonderful, and then tragedy strikes. All of his cattle, all of his sheep, all of his goats, all of his camels, they're all taken from him. He loses all of his ways of life, his ways of making money, his farm, his possessions. And then the house in which all of 10 of his children, his 7 sons and 3 daughters, were all together eating and celebrating, and it collapses, and he loses all 10 children at the same time. And then, even amidst all of this stuff in his life going wrong, he still chooses to praise God. And so we hear that yet again God is sitting there and bragging about how wonderful Job is in heaven, how upright and righteous, and how he fears God, and how he is so faithful. And Satan challenges God again and says, let me take away his health, and we'll see just how much he praises you, God. And so Job then becomes stricken with illness, with sores that cover his entire body from the bottoms of his feet to the crowns of his head, that are infected and that are painful and cause him to not even be able to wear clothes and to itch all the time. And he is disfigured in his bones, and he is given to all manner of diseases, to the point that every breath is pain, and he can't even keep food in his body. And so we find Job sitting there naked on a pile of ashes, sad about his children, in pain from his physical ailments, and his wife comes and says, Job, just pray to God to kill you so that I can be out of this marriage, because I'm leaving, and I'm not going to have anything to do with this. And so here is Job's lament. Everything in his life was good. As Satan said in the story, he was protected by God up until that point. Blessed in every way possible. The richest of the rich. A family that was filled with love, that cared for each other. And now here he sits, naked and in pain, itchy and scratchy on an ash pile, with nothing left. And he's in depression. curses the very day that he was born, wishing that it never happened. He curses the night on which he was conceived, saying that that night should no longer exist either. He cries out to God, saying that if only he had been a stillborn, if only he had been a miscarriage, how much better would his life be now, because he would sleep in the peace of death. He wouldn't be feeling the suffering and this pain. Again, our story of Job is not a history. It's not something that probably actually happened to a person, but it is a story that captures human emotion and feeling. The circumstances of Job's life may have never actually happened to one person, or maybe they did, but people experience this kind of depression, this kind of longing for death all around us on a daily basis. They know what it's like to lose all that they love. And they know what it's like to wish for an end. You see, in the story of Job, despite all that has happened, he still is crying out to God, asking God for relief. He's not taking the matter into his own hands. He feels like he should. He feels like he wished that life was over, but he's still choosing to cry out to God, to seek God's help in the situation. Job, even in the face of his overwhelming sorrow and mourning, still chooses to have those conversations with God, still chooses to turn to the only one who can provide him with hope, the only one who can rectify the situation. It is in this part of the story that we find instruction for ourselves, that even in the midst of our deepest sorrows, even when we are in those places in life that most of us at some point probably will experience, we can still turn to God. That there's still this possibility of hope and reversal if we just trust in the Lord. Job tells us that it's okay to be in that place of sadness and depression, that maybe not even just okay, maybe it is actually a part of what it means to be human. And yet, what it means to be a child of God, to be faithful, is to even in that dark place still turn to our Father in heaven, still cling to Him and pray for His hope and His intervention. As we continue through Job's story, we will hear next week from Job's friends as they try to comfort him or help him through his depression and his loss. It is a story of also human experience, a story where we hear friends come and they they come to us with the platitudes, those things like it'll all get better, or stick through it, that really don't make us feel any better. It's a story of bad advice. But it still continues to capture this place that Job is in, and this idea of how bad things really do happen to good people. And that even when our friends seem to abandon us or fail, that if we continue to place our trust in God, even if we continue not only through the depression, but through the foolishness of our fellow humanity, to trust in God, we can still find hope in the end. I will tell you this. We may now be in this place of sadness, but the story of Job does not end here. It is a story that will continue on, and in the end of the story, a prophecy that God's hope will be made manifest. And if you stick with me for the next so many weeks, I promise you that in the end, you will see the power of God reverse the forces of evil and the forces of this world in Job's life. Let us be a people that can endure a little darkness so that we may see the greatest light. Amen.